Nothing on the Bonnell Foundation's Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast should be considered medical advice. Medical advice can only come from your CF physician. Cystic fibrosis can be a devastating diagnosis, but living with the disease can bring positivity and a new appreciation for each day. From the Bonnell Foundation in Detroit, Michigan, it's the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast, sponsored by Viatris and Genentech. Here's your host, Laura Bonnell.
We're traveling 9 hours by plane for this podcast to the lush green grass of Dublin, Ireland. You may want to pour yourself a Guinness for this podcast if you're listening at home. And if you're walking while listening, then just picture yourself surrounded by the pubs in Dublin and the music or the countryside with flower shops and open land. It is definitely a beautiful place. And this is where we find Rory Tallon. He is 51 years old with cystic fibrosis, and he's a patient advocate for CF Ireland for their service team. CF Ireland is a nonprofit group there, and they provide information, guidance, grants, and advocacy. And Rory joined the organization in 2016. Rory comes from a pharmaceutical and clinical management background, and he graduated with degrees in industrial microbiology with chemistry and biological sciences. Rory and his wife Sarah have 2 young daughters, and it is time to get the story right from Rory himself. Welcome, Rory, and I certainly wish that I was back in Dublin right now. We were in Dublin prior to the pandemic, and it's beautiful there. Love it. So thanks for joining us, and welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, lovely. Really excited to do this interview. Brilliant.
Thank you. I did mention a bit about you, of course, in the intro, and I read that you coach your daughter's Gaelic football games and Camgi. Did I say that correctly?
Camogie. So the Gaelic game is just football and there's hurling. Okay. So the female version of hurling is called camogie. So camogie. Yeah.
Camogie. Wow. So, when I looked online, it looks very women and powerful. Tell us briefly about that.
Yeah, well, the Gaelic games. So I played hurling into my adult years, and it's the same sport. It's the exact same sport. So it's really, I loved it as a sport. It's a ball game, small ball, and you hold the ball in your hand, and you hit it with a stick, basically a hurl, right? And it's a team sport, so there's 15 players per team. So it's a very fast-paced game, very physically demanding, very aggressive, can be a little bit injury-prone, but it's just awesome to play. I really, really enjoyed it as a sport myself. So I'm trying to coach my daughter's team, the under-10 group here,
That's exciting. That's fun. I bet the girls love it.
They do, yeah. They abuse their coach, but they do, they do love it, yeah.
As they should, right? When my husband coached soccer, it was the same way for the girls. They were like, Dad, but what is the population in Ireland for the CF community?
There's around 1,400 people with CF in Ireland. Yeah, so it's a small community, but it's a good, strong community. There's a good, strong community voice, and certainly we work with CF Ireland. People really got on board with advocacy campaigns and, things we're trying to do. There's a very, very well connected community.
It is a small community there, as 40,000 in the United States and 70,000 worldwide. Is it harder for you to get modulators or medications, or is everything fine for everybody in Ireland? Yeah,
it's good now, but it was an uphill battle to get the modulators reimbursed within the Irish healthcare system. So, the way it works is we're governed by the European Medicines Agency. So once the European Medicines Agency approves a medicine, it can be licensed in each of the countries, but each of the countries have also to agree, and certainly Ireland has to agree to fund it. So the funding and the agreement to fund it, that was an uphill battle for us. But we're good now. It's Trikafta in the US, it's called Kaftrio in Ireland. And in the European region, it's called Kaftrio. So we have that now. But we did have, battles with the health authority to get that reimbursed for our members. So there was a lot of advocacy, and not just Kaftrio, but also the previous, the first, so Kalydeco, and then, so there's 4 CFTR modulator drugs. So the first one and the second one, Orkambi, that was a struggle to get that reimbursed. But we were lucky to get an agreement at the time that we got Orkambi reimbursed, that we got a deal that would ensure that the next version of CFTR drugs would automatically be reimbursed. And that did happen with Kaftrio, but because of the mutation-specific nature of Kaftrio license, some of the mutations weren't initially included in that reimbursement deal. And so we had a battle. There was about 35 families over the last year since Kaftrio was made available to the 6 to 11 age group in Ireland, that there was about 35 children with CF, with a permutation of CF mutations that were excluded from that deal, even though Kaftrio is licensed by the EMA for their mutations. So we had an uphill battle, lobbying our government and our health authority to include those 35 children. So that's now been resolved, and fortunately now Kaftrio is available to all who it's licensed for here in Ireland. So we're fortunate now, and we have the 4 CFTR modulator drugs available to prescribe here. So yeah, we're really lucky.
So what year did you get Kaftrio then?
October 2020 it came in, I believe. It was first licensed Kaftrio, and then I started myself in January 21.
Oh, okay.
So I'm almost about just over 2 years. Yeah.
So Ireland got it a year after the US.
Yeah. So but we're, as a country and globally, in terms of access to CFTR medications, we're very privileged. Not every country within Europe even have agreed to reimburse CFTR medications. So we're lucky in Ireland that we do, and they also have it in the UK and France and Germany and so on, as far as I know. But not every country in Europe is as lucky as that, So there are disparities around the globe with access to these amazing drugs.
Right, and very, very, it's very upsetting that we can't globally all be on the same page for health. But we are working on it, and I want to go back and forth between you having CF and CF Ireland. But why don't you tell us what CF Ireland does?
Yeah, well, we're a patient organisation set up back in 1963, I think it was. This is our 50th year, and we're the oldest CF organisation in Europe, I think it is. But we were set up to support families and people living with CF, so families affected by CF and people with CF themselves. And we're an organisation, we provide support services, we provide grants and direct supports to families, assistance. So we have things like bereavement grants, we have transplant grants, counselling grants, exercise grants, various different grants. If families are in difficulty, we can help them out, sort of financial difficulty. We have discretionary funds. We're also an advocacy group, so we will lobby the government for change at senior advocacy level. We also will advocate with families on case by case, more direct advocacy in terms of personal advocacy for, things in their life, maybe that's school or education or workforce, or, things that their CF affects their day-to-day interaction with those aspects of their life, So we will write support letters, we will contact people on their behalf, explain the nature and the requirements of CF, to try pave the road for them, basically, And then we have research as well, and we have fundraising, because we're not funded by the government. So all our organisation is funded by generosity of the public. So we have a fundraising team that we run, events and campaigns, media campaigns, and so on, to increase the profile and awareness. And as an advocate, I also, we also get requests to speak to groups like maybe a college faculty, or in US probably be high school, but middle school, sort of teenager equivalent age groups. Mm-hmm. Sometimes in Ireland it's primary school. I'm not sure what it is in probably junior school in the US, but like the odd time we might speak to schools or a younger age group like that as well, just to explain what CF is in age appropriate sort of language. And I mentioned the research as well. So we will look to partner with people, fund research projects. We do sometimes get some part funding from government agencies to support a research project that we may also be part funding in collaboration with an academic institution, or so. Mm-hmm. we have a few things going on there. So it's busy. Like we're only a small workforce. There's only about 13 or 14 of us employed in CF Ireland, but we're busy. We try to make ourselves known.
And I would think that because you have a small CF community, you're able to probably help everyone. Is that correct? Or
we help as many families as we can within the Republic of Ireland, and that would be nationwide. Yeah. So we do. We help as many as we can.
And what is the biggest need in Ireland? Is it financial assistance, or is it education, would you say? Or I don't know, maybe it varies like it does here.
One of our most successful grants is our exercise grant, where we will give a small monetary sum to families to support, exercise initiatives. So whether that's a gym membership or purchasing home exercise equipment, or subscriptions to a local football club or swimming club or whatever it may be. We ran that as a pilot in 2009, and since then we implemented it officially, and that is our most demanded support that we provide. Families really appreciate that. It was also to incentivize exercise and recognize the value of exercise in keeping people with CF well, so that's where that comes from. So that's our most sought after grant. But other needs, you have families that might find themselves in financial difficulties, and we will support those families too. And, collaborating and advocating and, media awareness of CF would be our biggest sort of priorities, and lobbying at that sort of interagency level between government and health authorities, and funding. We've also funded and part funded, clinical posts and help achieve better standards in CF treatment centres, in terms of the infrastructure and physical layouts of CF treatment centres and units, so trying to improve the conditions and the standard level of CF care around the country. So we do all that and advocate for all that and lobby for all that and part fund some of that or completely fund some of those initiatives, so they're the major important things that we've done and achieve and strive to do.
And I follow you on social media, CF Ireland, and I really enjoy seeing what, you're all doing. And that is one of the wonderful things about social media, is that we can connect, oceans apart and everything. And it is wonderful. I wonder, do you feel any connection to the United States through social media? Do you look at the U.S. and think, geez, we need to work on that in Ireland? Or do you think the U.S. really needs to work on that because we have it great in Ireland?
I can't really speak about the U.S. setup or system, because to be honest, I'm not fully aware of it, but in terms of social media and connection, I know we have our media officer, if you like, and it would be on top of anything social media related. And you're speaking to the worst person in the world for social media, because I have Facebook, but I barely ever use it in a social capacity. I might look at it in terms of things going on with work and stuff, but I probably joined one or two of the other platforms and looked at them once and never went back to them. So I am probably the most prehistoric sort of social media person you can speak to.
That's okay. You have a person, so you don't need to do it. So that's even better almost. But what else does CF Ireland do when you're raising awareness? What are you, telling people in Ireland as it pertains to CF? And I had a question here. Your health insurance is connected to your employment. So if you lose a job, you lose your health insurance. Yes. I know in the UK, it's not connected to your employment.
Yeah.
Is that true in Ireland as well?
This is very similar to the UK. It'd be more in line with the UK than the US, but slightly different to the UK. So we do have public health care, and it's, free to the public, but we're very fortunate that all our CF care and treatment and medication is funded under the public system. So we do have a system of private health insurance as well, but that's sort of a nice to have more than so that for those who can afford the private health insurance, you can see a consultant on a private basis without long waiting queues, but the CF care in Ireland is excellent under the public system, and while other areas of the public system, there may be long queues to see the consultants and to receive treatments. In CF, the treatment and access to consultants is immediate as you need it. We have world-class public healthcare for CF in Ireland, so we're very, very fortunate. And all our medication is funded under the public system as well. So we're very fortunate, yeah.
So you don't have a lot of big financial needs then? You don't have we have co-pays and a lot of hospital bills and...
No, we don't have those for CF. It's funded under the healthcare system. So it's really excellent, yeah.
Incredible. That is fantastic.
Yeah, we're very lucky, yeah.
So let's go back a little bit to when you were diagnosed. You were 2 months old, right?
Diagnosed at 2 months old, yeah. I was born in October, and by Christmas I wasn't doing well, and I was in hospital over Christmas. So I was diagnosed over my first Christmas, So that was a, shock to my family. No one else in the family had CF. They'd never heard of it. Very similar story to many families. And, as a child, I was quite sick as an infant, but then once I got the treatment, it started to bounce back. But, all through childhood, I would have been sick every year with colds and flus and, those winter viruses, and they always hit me really badly. I'd be sick for blocks of weeks at a time with those things. But fortunately, as a child, I didn't need to go into hospital for intravenous antibiotics on a very frequent basis at all. So I was rarely in as an inpatient in hospital throughout my childhood and similarly throughout adult life. I haven't, I've been very fortunate to be well with CF in my adult life. I've been inpatient needing, antibiotic treatments, but just on a very infrequent basis. So I count myself very, very lucky, 51 years old. My lungs are still working well, so I'm very blessed, really. And since these modulators came on, especially Kaftrio or Trikafta in the US, that's had a radical improvement for me, so, and I'm tolerating it well. So see myself as being really, really lucky and fortunate as well. I know others, of course, and some very personally well that, lost the fight to CF, so that's tough,
Right. So when you were diagnosed, because it was before newborn screening,
yeah.
How did your parents figure it out? What was it a doctor or did they figure it out? Do you remember?
My mother, as far as I can recall from my parents telling me, is my mother just really persisted with the medics to say there's something not right here, because the nappies were terrible. I was coughing, and I just wasn't gaining any weight. So between conversations with the local doctor and the hospital and so on, they brought me into hospital that Christmas, and where the hospital I went to, that's where the CF consultant was. Now, it's probably fairly new set up at that stage, but you're going back to the 1970s at that stage. So, but yeah, I was diagnosed at that Christmas then. There's an adjustment to a family. Now, I was the second eldest in the family, so we're close in age. So my older brother, so for my parents, they had 2 young children basically, and this to deal with, So I suppose it was an intense period for them.
Absolutely. But so wonderful that they saw something and realized that they needed an answer and then got one.
Absolutely, yeah. And as you said, there was no newborn screening for CF at that stage. So, CF would only have been diagnosed through symptoms, so it takes them to persist. It's very, and you see it very often, people diagnosed late in life with CF, they've been told they've been asthmatic and they've been treated as having asthma all their life and treated for whatever, an infection as it arose, but never sort of people not investigating to a proper level maybe of the root cause of some of these things, So it is great now since 2011, the newborn screening, that CF was added to the newborn screening program here. So
okay,
little heel prick test in babies, and they take a sample of the blood and screen it. So CF is included in that panel now since 2011. So most diagnoses now are through that screening program.
That is wonderful. Yeah. And it was 2007 here. So we were very close to getting it on newborn screening, which is, and still people are getting misdiagnosed, as we know, because all the mutations aren't on that newborn screening panel. So we have a lot of work to do. But then fast forward, you found your soulmate, your wife, and
Sarah,
you had kids, which
that was a journey.
Most people know, men are not sterile. They have fertility issues because the vas deferens isn't missing. But you were able to have the girls.
Yeah, we had to go through IVF journey to have our children, but we're not everyone that goes through an IVF journey comes out with children at the end result. So again, I've seen myself very fortunate that we ended up with 2 children from that journey. I mean, it was expensive. We had to pay privately for it. It's not publicly funded, or it wasn't at that stage at least. But yeah, with two daughters now through that, it's brilliant. Yeah.
And were you aware of that growing up? I just wonder because I know my daughters are 26 and 28, and they just recently were telling them about, issues or not issues, but things that could impact pregnancy and stuff. So I just wonder what age you were made aware.
I remember my first hospitalization in the adult clinic, in the adult unit. I was 17. It was the summer before my final year of school. I was in for 2 weeks, and during that stay, I think it was the physiotherapist at a physiotherapy session was just chatting, and that's when they told me about infertility in males with CF. So I was about 17 when I learned of that. And for some reason, I don't know why, it wasn't a shock to me. It just didn't shock me. Almost as if I expected it to be the case. I can't describe it. So so from 17 onward, I knew that was the case. But I met my wife, Sarah, later in life. And when we first met, from the very early onset, I explained the whole situation regarding fertility to her. And we knew that, to go ahead, that we'd have to go through that journey. So, and we did. So
you did, and it worked out.
Yeah.
So, cat hair from the wandering cat.
Yes,
that walked by. Oh my gosh.
My dog is in the background barking away, so hopefully you can't hear him. But
no, we can't hear the dog, and you couldn't hear the cat, but I could see her, and then her cat hair was flying, as they say. Also, more back to CF Ireland and the different situations that face, your CF community. How would you say things are at this point? I wondered, how many CF clinics do you have? And then does the rare disease community, including cystic fibrosis, do you have a pretty big voice, even though you're a small group of CF people? Yeah,
there is a rare disease group, and CF is very much part of that. In terms of CF units and clinics, there's about 5 or 6 pediatric centres around the country, and same again for adult units around the country. We would be underrepresented by a gold standard of number of consultants. So that's something, the consultants and we lobby for, is trying to bring CF services up to be international standards of per ratio consultants to patient and so on. So, resources would be under-resourced in some clinics. Some clinics might be just about adequate. So they're the sort of things we work towards. But we're good. Geographically within Ireland, we have a clinic at most of the major urban centres.
That's wonderful. Do you feel that when people are newly diagnosed, that they're aware of CF Ireland and that they're reaching out to you so you're able to educate them right away?
That is a challenge. And when a family with a newly diagnosed child with CF, the clinic would inform them of CF Ireland. It's on the family then to reach out to us. But once they do reach out to us, we will register them with our organisation, and we will try send them, information and information booklets and so on, and then explain to them what we do and how we can help them along the way. And we'll chat to them, and we can arrange for someone to talk to them more personal level as well, within their sort of locality or broad locality, so that they connect them into a network of other families living with CF, so they can, share the experience basically.
Are you spread out, the CF families, are you spread out throughout Ireland? I mean, I guess you would say, of course, yes, but I'm just curious if you're finding more families in a certain area.
It would be spreads fairly evenly spatially in line with the population distribution within Ireland. So within the Dublin area, that's nearly half the population lives within the greater Dublin area of the country. So it'd be the same with CF families. It would be a representative breakdown of that spatial nature of the Irish population. But it's where families are spread nationwide. Yeah. There's an interesting thing in the mutations within CF. So F508 mutation is the most common in Ireland, and about 75% would be at least one F508 mutation. But they call it a Celtic mutation, and there's families concentrated in the Munster region, which is the southwest region of Ireland, and they have a higher incidence of a Celtic mutation. I think it's the G551D mutation. And that is found at a higher incidence in that very sort of concentrated geographical area within Ireland. Don't know why. I'm sure there's great theories around that, but they call that a Celtic mutation because it's so highly concentrated in that southwest Ireland region. So
yeah, that's very interesting. Do you have a percentage of your population that has such rare mutations that they can't get on a CF modulator? It's 10% in the United States.
Yeah, it would be similar here.
Okay. What is the visibility in Ireland about cystic fibrosis? Again, because you have a smaller population, but you're doing big work. I mean, you're visibly out there. So does the whole country kind of know what cystic fibrosis is?
No, you still have families whose first child maybe is diagnosed with CF and they've never heard of CF in their life. You still get that. But sort of as a general population level awareness, I would say the general population would have a brief acknowledgement of CF, knowing that it is a respiratory illness. Of course, there's many people who have never heard of it, but as a general, I think our awareness and our profile has come into the public psyche a bit, especially within the last 20 years because of a lot of very heavy media campaigns and advocacy pitches that we ran for treatment units, for access to these CFTR medications, for setting up a transplant clinic in Ireland. So even, go back 20 years ago, anyone who needed a lung transplant in Ireland had to go to the UK on a shared nation basis, but now we do have a transplant unit in Ireland. But they were all battles to get these services and medications in place and so on. So we would have had, media campaigns and advocacy campaigns and so on, and protests as needed to government, to achieve all that. So through media coverage of all those campaigns, I think CF was sort of kick-started into the public knowledge. So I think the general public awareness is that in general they've heard of CF and they know it's a respiratory illness, and some may know a lot more about it, or families in Ireland it's very hard to go anywhere in Ireland without knowing somebody who knows somebody. So you're never too far removed from a family who has either a cousin or a relative that has CF or has someone with CF in their family, or you're talking to someone and it turns out like their neighbours 2 doors down had a child with CF, so you're never too far removed from it when you get talking to people that you find they're aware of CF or they knew someone who had CF or something like that,
That makes sense, right? Based on the population of Ireland.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's only about 5 million population in Ireland. Yeah.
Gotcha. And that's still a good number. That's still, that's a lot of people. So CF Ireland, you're also doing a great job of advocating. And how is the government receptive to all the things that you're advocating for about people with cystic fibrosis? Yeah,
we have support of, in any of these campaigns, we have support of you might get a handful of local politicians or whatever that really take on board your case and go with you and run with you on it. But typically, it can be a prolonged battle for some of these things. And even though you might get favourable responses and people acknowledging you and saying, yes, we'll help you out, but by the time that actually comes about, it can go across different governments, across elections and so on. And, you have to keep it at the fore or it'll get dropped in an election campaign and run up and frenzy. These things that you're looking for, you really have to be proactive and reinforce on a frequent basis your voice to keep it on the agenda, to keep it to the fore of the agenda. And sometimes, unfortunately, you have to really work the media to get it into profile, into really, almost front page profile in media to get the resulting political will to change whatever it is to make it happen for you. That's the way it's been typically, and you probably don't always get everything you want, but you strive to make a change for the better, and you strive to get as much of that change as you can, but you don't always get everything, of course. But you really have to be proactive, get the voice of the community, and we have fabulous ambassadors that have come on board and shared their very personal stories and helped us. It's those patient voices that really get it over the line. It's those really sad, really really inspiring stories from people, because, you're talking to anyone with CF and you have a story that's probably full of either sadness and, a battle, but you also have the positive elements of their life and what they may have done with their life or achieved with their life, or how they're going about doing what they do on a daily basis. For some people, of course, that's just being able to get up and get through the day, with CF, and others are off doing fabulous things with their life with CF. But it's very individual. But those individual stories and voices and those ambassador testimonies, they're the things that really make the difference. So we have to thank our community for adding their voice to our campaigns to help make a change for the better. Yeah.
I agree with you. And I think what you do in Ireland definitely has an impact on the United States and vice versa. I think the advocacy is huge because our stories are so important, and
yes,
it does support each other, even when we see what your government is doing or you see what our government is doing. And it just points to this unity across the world that we're all trying to get the same thing for our CF population, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. We'd always be watching what all the other countries and organizations are doing, and our attempts, we would be looking at CF, US CF Foundation and so on, and CF Europe, we're involved at that level. There's a European level, and then, we check in on the UK CF Trust, like those, and we see things that they do well, and we say, we must maybe try that here. Or they might see things that we do well, and vice versa. So we're sharing our really successful approaches to things. And obviously you had Kaftria or Trikafta before we did and so on. But, all those clinical trials are very US heavy, if you like, in terms of patients. That data, then you're through all those clinical trials and data, that's what European Medicines Agency are basing their assessment on, proving, looking at all the experience of all the trials gone before, so that's thanks, globally to CF patients, but very specifically probably to many of the US patients who would have been sort of more to, a higher component of those trials would have been run in the US, so it's a global effort really. But we're very thankful for all those, anyone that took part in the clinical trial to get those CFTR drugs to where they are now. We have to be so thankful to them, all those volunteers and participants of all those studies.
Absolutely. And you have CF and you're living it every day. What do you see in CF Ireland that you maybe appreciate the most, or that gets to you the most about helping other people? And maybe what do you see within the community that says, oh, thank gosh that we have this, exercise grant? But if you can tell us a little bit about how CF Ireland helps and educates, and kind of what the response back is from the community.
Okay, yeah, well, we run an annual conference every year, and that would consist of medical experts speaking on whatever we have requested they speak on, maybe as an emerging trend in CF, or typically updates on the CFTR medications and the clinical trials in the last few years. But also, we'd speak on the importance of diet and the changing nature of diet in CF and healthy diet in CF, and we'd have experts and speakers and people with CF sharing their testimonies on exercise or physiotherapy and various aspects. And then, all the other sort of lesser known things about CF, so fertility journeys, the whole IVF journey and so on. We've had talks on that and people sharing their experience on that. And the other aspects of CF, like osteoporosis and anything and everything that goes, kidney disease, CF-related diabetes, CF liver disease. So we tried to keep our members up to date with these medical narratives going on in the journey of anyone with CF. So those conferences are very well attended. And we also, since we all got to kick up the rear with COVID in terms of having to reinvent how we do things. So we went to, virtual conferences and virtual webinars and information evenings. So we've had information evenings on various specific focused things like, housing supports and how to purchase your own home and things like that. So we've had information evenings on very subject-specific things, over the last few years. And then we have one or two support groups. One very successful and, popular almost support group at the moment is a pregnancy support group for people with CF who are pregnant or thinking of becoming pregnant or have recently had a baby, so things like that. So I'm trying to set up working groups and support groups and whatever we feel there's a need for, or whatever our members will tell us there's a need for as well, so we try to react to what our members will tell us as well.
And that support group sounds great because is it for women who are on Kaftrio or not? Either way, it's an issue, right?
Yeah, these would be people with CF themselves, who are thinking of becoming pregnant or, as I said, are pregnant or have just recently been pregnant, to share their experiences and what worked well through their pregnancy journey and their, experience with the different clinics, the maternity clinics and the obstetrics clinics, and their care with their CF teams and what did they do, what did they not do. Doctors will differ a little bit on approaches, but they're able to just talk through those things. And some will say they came off Kaftrio if they were on it for early pregnancy, and some may have not come off it. And so they'll talk through all those various different aspects. And we have our in-house researcher, and she has attended some of those group meetings because very often they're through just informal discussions of a group like that. Things will present like needs, like maybe you might suddenly see there's a need for a research study to look at one aspect of care or medical treatment or something. You say, okay, there's a research avenue now that previously unexplored that we need to focus on, so you have those spin-offs coming off a group like that as well. So, whatever we can do.
Right. And I think some of the beautiful things that you're saying, we're such one community, whether we're in Dublin or Detroit, we are going through the same things. You're 51 years old, an inspiration to anybody, and any parent who just has a child with CF can look at you and say, Rory's 51. Look at him. Yeah. That is wonderful. And then I would have so much in common with your parents. Like I get the same worries. I get the same, we would understand the journey so much. So I think that is such a beautiful thing that we're all working on very similar things and everybody's kind of in the same place and advocating. And I think it's beautiful that we have so much in common and that we can really share and teach it to each other.
Yeah, it's drawn on the experience and what works. And, there probably would be cultural differences, between US and Ireland in day-to-day life and day-to-day psyches and so on, but CF is more unifying because it's so common. The experience in the day-to-day struggles and battles are, it's the same story wherever you are almost. What changes is the access to care and support services in your community and support services by authorities, or how a school treats you, or how an employment workforce might treat you, or make accommodations for you and so on. And that's where the voice of like CF Ireland can help educate people. We write letters of support for provision of housing, or letters of support to an employer to say they have this employee and these are the simple things that they could do to make their day-to-day employment work better for them. But I'm sure like the arguments I would make for someone in employment in Ireland would be the same arguments you would be making for someone in employment in the US, because it's the same needs for the person with CF, essentially, to make their life easier, to help them along the way, in terms of extra breaks or whatever it may be in a workforce, or, just to help them, because you understand the condition, but the employers don't. And even though you might explain on a scientific basis or a medical diagnosis basis, this is a respiratory illness, affects other organs as well, and this, that's all fine. But what it means practically and day to day and translated into, right, that's extra bathroom breaks, that's extra snack breaks, it's time if you're tired, it's down to 3-day week instead of 5-day week if you need it, or, reduced hours or whatever it may be in a workforce that helps that employee be sustainable in their employment, or whether that's in school as well. Those sort of arguments in school, to how a teacher might have to supervise medication for a young child in early education, all these arguments are the same, whether that's US or Europe or Ireland or wherever in the world,
Yes. And I wanted to ask you to elaborate a little bit more on something you touched on that I wanted to ask you. And that is, what are the differences for people living there? Climate, the cultural aspect. What is that you experience differently from us?
I think culturally, let's say, with doctors and so on, I think we'd be very accepting of what a doctor will tell us. Sort of the Irish psyche. We would trust probably what we're told more so than we wouldn't necessarily challenge, or would be maybe very shy to challenge. So I've found over the years myself that I will, there's medications that didn't work for me, even though the doctors told me to stay on them, and I may have discontinued some myself, but I did what I felt was right if I felt the medication wasn't working for me, so I would have discussed it with the team and told them what I was doing, but the drive for that change came from me, not necessarily them, if you know what I mean. So I've learned to think about and not just accept what I'm being told from, let's say, doctors along the line. I've learned that over the years, but, I think probably culturally in America, you're probably better at that in terms of your self-agency than your average person in Ireland, probably a less developed capability of self-agency, maybe. That's just my take on things, cut to the weather. Oh, Lord. The weather it's not very hot here, and the winters in comparison to the US would be mild, but they're just very wet and damp and cold. So for a lot of people with CF, you physically notice their symptoms worsening as October comes in because of the wet and cold conditions, And even there's very mixed populations here in Ireland. We have a lot of Eastern Europeans, and European people have moved into Ireland for work and so on, and, the winters in some of those countries can be very cold, but even though they're used to very sub-zero temperatures there, they still find Ireland very cold, even though the temperature isn't sub-zero. It's just as wet and damp and cold, and that cold sort of seeps into you. And they're used to temperatures, 10, 15, 20 degrees below zero, like lower than they are in Ireland.
Right.
But they still find Ireland very cold, even though the temperature isn't as low. So it can be a cold, damp place for a lot of the year, windy as well. So if you're out on a bicycle, it's hilly terrains, a lot of the country, and, wind and cold and damp and hills. And it can be tough if you're on a bicycle. But it's that sort of, our summers they're pleasant if it's not raining. We can have lovely sunshine days when it's not raining. And this summer has been a fairly wet summer this summer. Now it hasn't been very many great days. But when the sun is shining, it's beautiful. Like it really is. In the summer, it's gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it never gets too hot. We work in Celsius here, not Fahrenheit. So I can't give you the equivalents. Probably around a good day for us would be about, 21, 22 degrees Celsius in Ireland. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but
I don't either. I would have to Google that and look it up.
Probably 75 or something like that. I don't know how to guess. But that's a good day. And when the sun is shining and it's 20 degrees, 21 degrees, it's just a lovely place to be.
That sounds wonderful. It's definitely a beautiful place over there. And just one last question before we wrap it up. You're also, CF Ireland does fundraising.
We do, yeah.
I've seen some posts. So what kind of fun do you have with fundraising? You have different events and...
Oh, yeah, we have a few sporting events, a few more, less taxing events. Or a big one coming up for us now is we do a walk around in the Dublin area. It's called the Head-to-Head Walk. It's from Howth Head to Braehead. So it's the equivalent of a marathon distance as a walk.
Wow.
And you can do a half section if you want. So that's coming up in September. And that's, it's nice, it's a long walk if you do the whole lot, but you can do it at your own pace. It's nice. That's our head-to-head walk. We also have a Mount Mizzen cycle, which is a cycle from the very northern point of Ireland to the very southern point of Ireland. And it's done over 4 days. So for anyone intensely into cycling, you can do that as well. It's great. And there'll be all sorts of other people doing community-based fundraising, their own little fundraising projects within their localities. You might have a bake sale, or you might have a poker evening, or you might have golf classic, or whatever it may be. People very creative with their fundraising efforts, all sorts of everything. And then you have the marathons and the mini marathons and all this, and people will do those and raise funds for CF while doing those events, so very strong fundraising community. And some of these fundraising events, it's a lot of them might be done in memory of someone with CF who died, or might be done, you might be doing because you have a living relative with CF, and then families are getting on board and supporting. So that's where our community is very strong in our fundraising, in the local aspect of our fundraising as well, throughout the country.
That's wonderful. Everything sounds so exciting. Your events sound exciting. And I encourage everyone to look CF Ireland up and see what you're doing over there, because you sound like a wonderful organization. And it was great to meet you. I don't know if you speak Gaelic, or if you can end this podcast with any Irish proverb or anything, but it would be lovely if there's any, and I mean, with no notice too. I know you might not be prepared.
Simple one we would use with Guiness and Boherlat, which means may the road rise with you, as in best of luck. But the Irish language is such a beautiful language. I don't speak it day to day myself. My two daughters, they're going to school through Irish, Gael school it's called. So they're learning through Irish. So they can speak fluently. I can't, but off the cuff now, I can't remember any other sort of expressions. But the expressions in Irish are very lovely. You can translate directly to English, but they don't always translate very well. Like, they're very descriptive language, I would have to say. So off the cuff, I can't think of another one very handy for you, but
that's okay.
Maybe I'll look one up and send you an email, so you can have a look at it. But I'll ask my daughters, see can they recommend something.
Wonderful.
But the simple one I would know off the top of my head is Guiness and Boherlat, which simply made the road rise with you.
That's a beautiful one. I'm familiar with that. And yeah. I appreciate giving us the vision of Ireland. We can kind of, see the green grass over there. And I mean, it's just, I can see out your window just a little bit, but
yeah, it's bright, sure. Yeah. Bright and green
right
in the summer. Yeah.
And thanks for sharing your story. I mean, you've given us insight into what people in Ireland with CF are dealing with and about your foundation. So thank you very much for sharing.
Yeah, lovely talking to you. And best of luck with your podcasts and your organization as well.
Thank you, Rory.
The original music in this podcast is performed by Kevin Allen.
It's not complicated.
Who happens to have cystic fibrosis.
We all got our worries and fears. I know it's got you frustrated, but loving you is so alright.
This has been the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast, sponsored by Viatris and Genentech. For more information and to learn more about the Bonnell Foundation, visit our website at thebonnellfoundation.org. That's the BONNELL Foundation.org. It was produced by Jag and Detroit Podcasts. Follow our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now.